degree of freedom that the robot has. So the wheels, even with the wheels, when it goes sideways, like the way it moves the wheels to say, hey, do something, help me. Or the head can tilt, and this arm, that just the arm alone is so effective in saying, I'm angry, I want to play, I'm upset. And of course, the screen, I think it's 100 pixels by 100 pixels. It's a tiny screen, and actually it's fine because they're only displaying the eyes. And the animation of the eyes is great. And you see that those people were definitely very well trained in animations. So that's, as of today, for me, it's the best example of how you can make a robot very, very expressive. And you don't need like a super complicated devices. It's just like a screen and 3 degrees of freedom in terms of motion. That's the list of the basic emotions that Cosmo has. Well, it comes from the marketing, the PR stuff from Cosmo, so there might be others. But what is funny here is that the eyes themselves, they are just blue blobs. There's no pupil, for instance. There's no eyebrows. It's just one blob. And just the shape of the blob, I actually recommend you to, if at some point you have to design a face for a robot, I recommend you to have that as a reference sheet next to your desk, because you basically have the shape, the range of eyes shapes that convey, at least for Western audiences, that convey like, I don't know, like 30 different emotions there. It's really, really impressive. And it's sometimes almost nothing. If you look at like that one and that one, it's very clear that this one is happy and this one is bored. It's just like one is the mirror of the other. Annoyed is great as well. It's like, we're talking about 10 pixels there, and it's, the emotion is, I think, extremely easy to read. Those two are interesting as well. Both are conveying the idea of being sad, and they use both to have this kind of, okay, I'm sad, but I still want to re-engage with you. So I'm looking at you, and then I'm looking down again. No, it's really impressive. Another completely different way of conveying, not really emotions, but like a form of intent, just based, this time just based on the posture of the robot, or posture and gestures. So the scenario is the robot wants to get to get some help to recharge. So that's the baseline behavior. The robot is just doing whatever he has to do and waiting for humans to help around. And the same thing with much richer not really emotions, but by moving the head back and forth, the robot shows very well its intent and like, look at me, I want to play. I don't know if so. This robot is PR2. I don't know if you've seen pictures of it, but it's there's again no degrees of freedom on the head. The eyes are just like the cameras, and actually there's 4 of them. It has a very small head. We don't see it very well there. It's not the exact shape, but there's no facial expressions that are possible with PR2. But just by the dynamic of the head, the way you move it, the way you move like back and forth, you shake your head, tells a lot in terms of what are your intentions. Okay, so this one is quite obvious. One thing that it might be the case that Serge told you a little bit about that, because that's one of his big theme of research, is the fact that your gaze is a very effective way to convey your intentions. By just looking at what you want to do, you're telling someone looking at you, that's what I want to do. Which is super convenient for robots. You don't have to speak, you don't have to do anything complicated, you just look at your target. Instead of looking at your fingers, you look at your target and you convey the information. Now, another way of conveying, another modality to convey emotions or intentions is something that I'm sure you all know very well.
get into this mess. I think we seem to be made to suffer. It's our lot in life. I've got to rest before I fall apart.
So I don't know if R2D2 did invent the non-verbal utterances, probably not, but it's definitely the robot that did make them popular. And
Isn't there like a whole language?
of course, but that's not the point I wanted to make here. And since at least in the original Star Wars is almost always, well, no, actually, right, it's talking to C-3PO. Okay, maybe that just happened. But in terms of human beings that are watching the movie, it's mostly sounds, but still conveys quite effectively what R2D2 wants to say. If we look at that applied to actual robots, it looks like that. Oh, here we are not even talking about non-verbal utterances. There is no real utterances going on. It's really like sounds. Well, in that case, there is a longer modulation that's closer to utterance. Of course, in that case, it's a multimodal expression system, right? The robot is moving the head, is showing some light, is making some noise, and doing some gestures as well with the ears. So the combination of those four modalities makes it even easier to recognize the emotions. But let's try something. If I going to put something very interesting on the screen. Okay. That. So let me restart the video. Sorry. And now you don't see the image, you only see the sound. You can only hear the sound. Can we recognize the emotions or what the robot is trying to convey? Yeah, that's one. Whoa. It's quite good. Some kind of excitement here. So I don't know if the sound design was really good. I think it was not always easy to guess what the robot was actually intending to convey by just listening to the sound. Yeah, okay. This one is okay. That's but it's definitely something we can easily build on the sounds and the beats of the robots. Okay, we are going to I'm going to finish with a little word. What time is it? Do we still have some time?
10 to.
Okay. Saying a few words about anthropomorphism. It's not anymore directly social signal processing, but that's something super important to know when you're designing robots for interaction with humans. Anthropomorphism, I'm sure you've all heard about that. If I show you those 5 pictures, you can probably easily tell me what are the very anthropomorphic robots and what are the robots that are not very anthropomorphic. I hope you all know that one, the Geminoid robot, which I don't know. I mean, I know the Ichigo, that guy actually, but the real one, not the robot, is very. That human being is very scary. His robot is even scarier, but it's not a very anyway. But we have very anthropomorphic human-looking robots, robots that are not looking like humans, or robots that are somewhere in the middle, so now as a anthropomorph design. And this one still has like face, eyes, and this one is of course creepy with a very it seems to look like, try to look like a human, but the body doesn't match. It's quite good. So what do we really call anthropomorphism? And actually anthropomorphism is something that is a bit more complicated than it looks like. Because the first thing that we really need to be aware of, it's a bit like emotions. It's not, the robot is not anthropomorphic or not. It's purely us that are interpreting and understanding something as human-like or not. It's not an intrinsic property of the robot. And it's not only linked to the robot's shape or behavior or expressions, it's also linked to person, like every individual personal psychological characteristics. We have a couple of very nice examples. I mean, you've probably heard about those stories many times anyway, but people who, like if you have a Roomba at home, vacuum cleaner, like I don't remember the exact number, but something like 60 or 70% of the owners of a Roomba give Roomba a name, like because I mean it's a vacuum cleaner. You wouldn't do that with your vacuum cleaner, right? But you do that with a robot that is a vacuum cleaner and just cleans alone. It's not really more intelligent than a regular vacuum cleaner, but anyway. We ran an experiment a couple of years ago with Roombas actually, and so we gave Roombas to various families, and we wanted to see if they were still using that vacuum cleaner after a couple of months. And one old lady, after a few weeks, she did phone us saying, oh, I don't find it very useful, so I'm not using it anymore. Okay, fine. We'll pick it up in a couple of weeks at the end of the experiment. That's absolutely fine. And then 2 weeks later, she rang us. I have a bit of a problem because I'm going on holidays. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, but can I bring you the Roomba? I mean, you can you just leave it in a cupboard, whatever. It doesn't matter. No, I don't want to leave it alone. You know, it's you've not been using it for the last 3 months. You don't care about it, but you don't want to leave it alone in your house. So it was very interesting because it shows that the usage, it doesn't even match with the fact that that person was still considering this robot as something not quite human, of course, but not a vacuum cleaner. Definitely not a vacuum cleaner. So the human, the robot, but also the context of interaction. If you're playing with a Roomba in your house, it's quite different, and the way you perceive that robot is going to be quite different from the way you perceive the exact same model of Roomba if you see it in the uni doing some vacuum cleaning, because the context, the social and the cognitive context of your home elicits more interaction with whatever is around, or you have closer contact with them. And time, and I'm going to come back to that in a moment, but over time, our relationship to things, and technologies in particular, does change quite a lot. And it looks like that, actually, the evolution of our relationship to technologies. Do you know about, so we start with an initial tendency to anthropomorphize things, which usually is quite low. I mean, if I tell you, oh, I'm going to give you a Roomba, are you going to give it a little name and pet it every morning? You're going to laugh at me, saying, no way. So usually we wouldn't think of us as being very high anthropomorphizers. But as we interact with the technology, we tend to increase our, yes?
Does that curve change with age?
Yes, because this curve is modulated by that, and that. So it changes with age, it changes with, between you and me, it's not going to be the same curve. But the general shape, we have good reasons to think that the general shape will be the same. And this peak here is what we call the novelty effect. So that's something you will hear quite often in human-robot interaction. When the first time you interact with something new, like now, and I've all seen you, well, not all, but most of you have seen you last year interacting with now, you were all, well, I shouldn't say that, but like many of you, and that's absolutely natural and normal, would start to interact with now as if it were an intelligent being that could do things that were way beyond what that stupid machine could actually do. But that's absolutely normal because that's our way to explore basically the social cognitive capabilities, the social capabilities of things, machines we don't know. So we always have this phase that we call initialization, where we start to establish and build a model of the cognitive thing, or a cognitive model of the thing that we are interacting with. And very often, it goes down once you've understood that, no, actually it's just a stupid robot that with one very, very weak CPU that cannot do much. Not very fun to play with. So we have this familiarization phase that usually goes down, but sometimes for some people it will remain quite high. And it finishes by to stabilize after a while where you will just like deal with your machine in a stable way. As you were asking me, yes, there is a lot of variation. Some people will tend to anthropomorphize way more than others, and some will be disappointed faster than others. Some won't be, and will continue to anthropomorphize their machines. But we'll still see. We usually see like this kind of inflection, like a peak, and then it goes down. There is one interesting thing: is the effect of disruptive behaviors. If you're playing with now, you're definitely in that part of the curve. Now it's becoming quite boring, and suddenly now there's something really cool, something you were not. For instance, I show you some super cool dance, and you see that now can actually balance in a very nice and smooth way and come back to its initial position. Because you were not expecting that, and it kind of contradicts your model, your expectation of the system. It might re-increase temporarily, or possibly for a longer period of time, your tendency to anthropomorphize it. And it can go the other way as well. Yeah. So Cosmo, well, we are all knowledgeable with robots, right? So we know what it does mean to build a robot like that and get it to animate. But for many people, and that's why Cosmo is actually a very successful toy. I think it was the most, best seller on Amazon last year in 2017, because for many people it remained quite high. It's very engaging and very surprising at the same time. I'm not going to show you those videos because we are running short on time, but I just want to show you the graph on the next slide. Very briefly, for this experiment, we were two children were sitting facing each other, and they had to carry. I mean, basically, they had to ask the robot to help them to carry over small domino tiles from one place to the other. So they would call the robot would come to me, they would give the tile to the robot was this big box on wheels, and the robot would bring it back to the other child. And sometimes we would introduce unexpected behavior. The robot would, for instance, refuse to come, or would take the tile and leave, or get lost, things like that. And we wanted to see how that would impact the way the children were perceiving the robot, if they were anthropomorphizing less or more the robot. And well, it didn't work out so well because they were really young, like 3 to 4, if I'm remembering well, and asking questions like formal questions to young children does not work. They don't answer, or they answer random things, or they change their mind 5 times, so it's impossible to say. But what was still quite interesting, that we did count how many times they were engaging with the machine. So sometimes it was just like putting something in the robot, sometimes it was like waving at the robot, sometimes it was calling the robot, saying, oh no, don't do that, all kind of actual interaction. And on the other axis, we plotted this, what we've called here, anthropomorphic perception. So based on the questionnaire we asked and the discussion we had with them, we rated how anthropomorphic they thought the robot was. So for instance, we asked them questions. If you were to go on holidays, would you take the robot with you, or would you leave it at home? Or do you think the robot could be your friend, or questions like that? And the interesting thing is, we had 2 clusters that were quite unexpected. The children that were interacting the most with the robot, so with more interaction with the robot, did not anthropomorphize a lot the robot. On the contrary, the one that were like really thought, yeah, that robot could be my friend, my best friend, and I like him, and I would definitely take him. They did not interact a lot with the robot. So this was a very small experiment. We had in total 26 children, so it's probably not enough to generalize to other populations with other children and so on. But maybe the important point here is anthropomorphism does not mean engagement. It's not because you make the robot more human-like that people will like it better, will interact more with it, and so on. All right. Let's stop here. Yeah, that's it. As you might know, in 2 weeks' time, I'll be gone. I'm moving to Bristol. So I wish you the best. If you have questions about the lectures, materials, you have two more weeks to ask questions. I mean, I will still answer the emails, but if you want to ask questions, do it soonish. And that's it. Good luck.